We have Rahk Lash joining. I feel like I maybe heard a ping. Let's hope it works this because I'm not hearing a thing.
What's up, Javon? Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
Cool, cool. Cool, cool.
Excellent.
Cool.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. 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 Um. Well, we figured it out. We had 3 minutes,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you want to risk popping off and coming back in again.
No, we
Uh.
can hang out here, man.
All right. Cool. 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 Well, it's good to have you here this morning. I'm sending over some troubleshooting emails, and so just give me a moment while I loop people back in that we figured it out.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me this morning and going through that. That's why we do the run through
Hey,
at 11:30.
I was gonna say the same thing, man. That's why we prep. What's keeping you going today? Is there a song in your heart? Is there a show,
Ooh,
a quote, or something? What's keeping you?
oh, keeping me going today. That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think my mind has been all over the place this morning.
Mhm.
Um, I have a lot of trainings that I've been doing this week and tabling events because it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Yeah.
So I think what's been keeping me going is sort of like, uh, what was I saying to myself this morning? Prepping my attitude.
Mm,
So it's like remembering, even though I'm prepping things together for like paperwork and keeping track of all like these tasks and deliverables, that's important for me to check in with myself too. And so kind of like prep your attitude. So I've been
mm,
like keeping in line with that kind of square in that little box right now. So I'm not. That's a good question. I probably have to think a little bit more about it. That's what comes off the
good.
top of my mind right now. What about you? What's keeping you going this morning?
It's always a Beyonce song playing in my mind, in my
Really?
heart, man. Always, always, even when I don't realize it. Party is one of my favorite Beyonce songs.
Okay.
Either with J. Cole or Andre 3K, both of them work for me.
Got
Uh,
you.
but then also this quote about, we're not truly leaders until we've developed other leaders. So
Mm,
that's, I've been sitting with that and always thinking about, am I doing everything that I can do to support those around me on my team? How am I
mm,
showing up, right? How am I
yeah.
being flexible? How am I empowering? How am I, having tough conversations when necessary, but also showing up with love and giving people, all the opportunities and things that they need to do their thing.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man. Always keeping that headspace of leadership, showing up. I feel like that's a conversation that comes up a lot when I'm talking with men or even doing that self-reflection around like that accountability
hmm
of like you show up every day. Are you just showing up to perform, like
hmm
and showing up and performing your duties, showing up and performing how you want to show up, or are you really trying to develop people? Are you really trying to
Yeah.
sit with people and meet them where they are with compassion? And
Yeah.
so I appreciate that. I like
Yeah.
that. I like that.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Um, so it is 12. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So folks may or may not be popping in. It is lunchtime. We have designed this to be sort of like a lunchtime sort of chat, so folks are able to pop in, ask us questions,
Yeah.
get things going. So I'm gonna go ahead and get like the official welcome, even as people start popping in. Hopefully, we have some folks join us. If not, this is always a resource we can share later. But good morning or good afternoon. It's already noon. Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the Engaging Men Q&A. Q&A with Jay. My name is Javon Howard, Manager of Engaging Men Initiatives here with the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. This is our Engaging Men Q&A program where we answer all your training and technical assistance questions pertaining to engaging men for working with men as survivors of sexual violence and also talking with men and engaging men around violence prevention. Every couple of months, we get together and we answer all your training and technical assistance questions that you've submitted, either directly to me in trainings or with the engagement training and technical assistance form, which we'll leave a link for that in the comments. You can also find that in our on my signature page for my job description as well, to submit any kind of questions you have for the topics that we have coming up for this program. Today's topic that we'll be discussing would be the intersections of hazing, masculinity, and sexual violence. This is a topic that I've been looking forward to for us to cover. I get tons of questions all the time about men's health, about social justice, about violence prevention, about working with men and survivors, especially on college campuses. Hazing, of course, is something that impacts men across more areas than just college campuses. So hopefully we'll get more into that conversation today when we're meeting and having this conversation. We're having this conversation with Rahk Lash from A Call to Men. He is an esteemed colleague of mine. We actually work together with A Call to Men. He serves as the Vice President of Programs. Is that your correct title, Rahk?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
perfect. Vice President of Programs. I've been working with Rahk for about a couple of years now. I think we met officially last summer or maybe the summer before. Time is an illusion. But it's a good brother right here. I knew that when I had to cover this topic and we wanted to get into it, that I definitely wanted to have this conversation with someone from A Call to Men, and Rahk is the perfect person for this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to us getting into it. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and start getting into it. If you want to introduce yourself a bit, Rahk, or say something about yourself, feel free to do so.
Well, first, Javon, I want to make sure you can still hear me and my audio's coming through.
Yeah, I can
All
hear
right,
you.
man, I got nervous. I just put my phone on Do Not Disturb just to make sure. I was like, man, I might have messed up the whole system doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Man, first off, thank you. Thank you so much, Javon, for allowing me to be here on behalf of A Call to Men. And just wanted to introduce A Call to Men quickly for those that may not necessarily be aware. Call to Men is a violence prevention organization for over 20 years that has been engaging boys and men on conversations of sexual violence, domestic violence, bullying, anti-racism. We do our work from a racial and gender justice lens. And the vision of A Call to Men is to help create a world in which all boys and men are loving and respectful so that all women, girls, and those at the margins of marginalization feel valued and safe. And we do that by promoting healthy manhood. And when we talk about the margins of the margins, we're talking about, who's further impacted by those conversations and those topics and those isms and forms of oppression. And we really do our work centering the experience of Black trans women within our work. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Giving that shout out for what A Call to Men does. I know we're over here in Ohio, we love A Call to Men. And whenever we can, we try to have some sort of project or programming with you all. So thank you. So today's topic, we are talking about hazing, masculinity, and sexual violence. So to be honest with you, hazing is not one of my fortes or expertise topics. So I'm really happy for you to be here because I would love to really learn more about this with you, as well as with the member programs that I'm serving as well. So I'm really looking forward to having your expertise. So with that being said, the first question, with all of us not really understanding, knowing what hazing is, can you give us a definition from your own words of how you would describe what is hazing?
Yeah. When you look at the definition of hazing from a number of different sources, there may be some words that are different, but at the core of it, what it's really getting to is any type of activity and behaviors that are intentionally trying to degrade, trying to harm, trying to promote any type of violence, right, or exploit somebody for the sole purposes of gaining membership or holding on to status within an organization, within a community, right, within any type of setting like that, whether or not the participants are willing. That's a general definition, no matter where you look at hazing, whether it's Stop Hazing, well, the one of the leading national organizations that's done a lot of research and great work, or whether you look at Byron Hurt's recent film and work that he's done for many years within the fraternity sorority space, but also all encompassing on hazing. I encourage everybody to take a look at that documentary he did. It's available on PBS as well as Amazon.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think it's interesting when you describe it as uh, maintaining and getting into membership, but also holding status. I think that's something that maybe folks don't necessarily hear very often. When I think of hazing, what comes to mind is always like Greek life. I always it's fraternities. It's never really hear about sororities really, but when I think about hazing and when I see it in from the public, it's always just fraternities. It's young men, they're hazing each other by like, spanking each other, wedgies, maybe forcing people to eat foods that they don't want to eat, things of that nature. Does that sound along the lines of something that you would be considered hazing? And do we see hazing beyond just like those Greek organizations?
Yes, absolutely. So first, I want to grab that piece that you just mentioned. Where hazing happens, is not just the fraternity and sorority life space, right? Now
Mhm.
that is typically, where we go to. I think that's the file cabinet in our heads, the schema, because I think that's where we can pull some of the most examples and sometimes the most extreme examples
Mhm.
by the time they make their way to us, whether that's through news or through films. There are staples, within Black culture, right? When we talk about films, we talk about Spike Lee's School Days, right? That's a classic Black film that, you know, sparked a lot of conversation, influenced a lot of culture, and even influenced the NPHC itself, right, within the scope of hazing. And then this other piece that you mentioned about, not necessarily hearing a lot about sororities, right? If we can stay in that space for a little bit about fraternities and sororities, what we know by statistics is in the most extreme cases of hazing, when someone has, succumbed to the injuries and the fatality of and the violence of hazing, we know that those numbers are men in large part. Since about 1970 to about 2021, in terms of hazing deaths, there's been about 3 women, right?
Okay.
Reported and documented. What we know is that every year, at least one person loses their life because of hazing, right?
Mm.
In large part, and that's at minimum, at least one person. In large part, we see reported instances and documentation with men in particular,
Mhm.
right? And where that hazing can happen, it can be anywhere from the boardroom to the college campus to the basketball team to a community-based organization, right? And some of the examples that you listed out absolutely can be examples of hazing. So stop hazing, right? This leading organization, they did some research and came up with this model, which I encourage folks to take a look at. It talks about the spectrum of hazing, right? And at the top of the spectrum, it talks about recognition, low to high, right? And then at the bottom, it talks about the actual occurrence of those things. And in the middle, we have at the one end of the spectrum, we have intimidation. That's the low end, right? That intimidation can be invisible, right? That can be,
Mhm.
you're getting a demeaning name, right? Something like that. That can happen through text messages, right? People can never even see that. That can
Mhm.
be demerit. That can be, I'm going to isolate you, Javon. If you're trying to get into my organization, say we work together, you're trying to get in my organization, and I'm going to isolate you for periods of time, right? Or there's silent threats there. Now on
Mhm.
the recognition side, that's low, right? It's hard to see those things. On the
Right.
impact, we actually see those instances more than we do the other end of the spectrum, which is the violence, right? And
Mhm.
those forms of the violence can be some of the things that you mentioned, you know, eating these things, forcing you to do these types of things, hitting you with something, physically abusing you,
Mhm.
right? Those things happen, but those things don't happen as much as the other things on the other end of the spectrum. And then right in the middle, you have other things that, can be forms of harassment, like sleep deprivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things that may interfere with work and your academic studies, right? So those are examples. And one thing, I'm gonna get a mic back now. I know I'm talking. I'm a preacher's
I know
kid,
he's
so
fine.
you give me the mic, I'm gonna keep talking, brother. The unique thing about hazing, because a question, that comes up often is like, well, is hazing just bullying, right?
Mm-hmm.
The two aren't the same, right? And for some people, it can be splitting hairs. For some people, oranges and oranges. For some people, apples and oranges. All of this is messy. But one
Mm-hmm.
thing that sets hazing apart from bullying is at the end of hazing, there is this kind of promise, right? And there's
Yeah.
this goal that feels amazing. Like you're going to go through this to get all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and then we will
Mm-hmm.
welcome you, right? Bullying is just like, I don't care what happens after this, right?
Right.
I don't care, right? It's just, I'm hurt people. I'm harming, right? And I'm going to harm you as much as I can. That hazing piece is set out and it's built like a pathway, right? And there's a lot that kind of convolutes and distort and justifies hazing because it's like, well, look at the end destination and the end goal.
Yeah. It's like a reward for it, It's like the rite of passage
Yeah.
to become a part of the fraternity, a part of the membership. I think that's pretty interesting because, like, as you're talking, mentally, I'm drawing like parallels to the man box. The way that we perform masculinity, the way we show up as men, like we're trying to fit into this brotherhood, this larger fraternity, and in some ways that we endure certain types of traumas or violences or degradation to become men. We cut off pieces of ourselves, we isolate each other and ourselves, we commit acts of violence and harm against ourselves, each other, against women, as. Part of being a man. So it's
Mhm.
kind of interesting where how that parallel is kind of drawn in my mind. And so that kind of comes into like the next question, where it's like, why do men allow themselves to be hazed? Why
Mhm.
do we have this culture where hazing is only seen in these spaces or these moments of like extreme violence, but we're not acknowledging some of these smaller crimes? Not, I'm gonna say crimes, but these small. Well, some of it is crime. I'm not gonna say not. It's not crime, but these smaller harms, um, like on the spectrum, right? Like
Yeah.
we're talking about along the spectrum. Like we aren't focusing on all of these. If these are the most common, why is it we're not seeing that? Why is our culture only focusing on these ends or making this more credible or legitimate? Why do men allow themselves to be hazed?
Yeah. Javon, I want to back up a little bit and just grab something that you said
Yeah.
about the man box, right? For those unfamiliar, the man box, that is a term that our co-founder and CEO, Mr. Tony Porter, he coined that term over 20 years ago, right? Within this work, and we see it pop up all the time. And what it is a demonstration of the collective socialization of man. Javon, where's home for you, brother?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm in North Carolina, born and raised in North Carolina. I've been to Arkansas, New York. Now, you and I are coming from different backgrounds, right? If me and you get in a room with 100 other men, all of us at the intersections of race, class, gender, and all other forms of social identity, as well as social membership, as well as identity, we have different experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we begin talking about our experiences, what we were taught about what it means to be boys and men, how we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to show up in the presence of other men, how we're supposed to treat women and think about women. The
Mm-hmm.
vehicle of how we got there may sound a little different, may look a little different, right? Metaphorically, it may be like I came in on a Cadillac, I came in on a Chevy, but the journey and the themes and what we picked up along the way will be very similar, right? And
Right.
how we've internalized those things and it's learned behavior. So that man box, talks about different things of, men are supposed to be dominant. Men are supposed to be in control, women are not. Men are supposed to, not ask for help. You're supposed to know,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it creates this cycle of consequences of, I can't ask for help, so I don't seek help, I don't offer help, and then I'm stuck. When someone offers me help, I can't accept that help, right?
Right.
So when I think about hazing and when I think about, all of the things that lay this fertile ground for hazing to exist, persist, survive, and thrive, a lot of this is rooted in the man, right? Particularly
Right.
when we look at men. And this piece of why do men allow themselves to be hazed, there is a myth in hazing of consent. And Javon, this is all murky. This is, as
Mm-hmm.
you know, man, doing this work, as you know, we
Yeah.
can have all the research and stats, but we always have to look at that and ask deeper questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, what's the story not reflected in the stats? Or what's the other part of this story that helps inform that?
Mm-hmm.
All of this is murky. When we talk about men allowing, and I really want to sit there for a second because what we're not talking about is any type of like victim blaming or anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a consent myth that well, they were okay with that. But when we really begin to unpack that, we have to ask: is it truly consent if there's coercion? Is it truly consent if there's peer pressure? Is it truly consent if, X, Y, and Z? If it's truly consent if there's groupthink? Um, and then there are situations, again, where it gets really gray. I think about legacies, right? And for those, unaware, when we say legacies, legacy, that can be anybody that is just kind of following a lineage of predecessors,
Mm-hmm.
particularly within family, right? Very patriarchal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can be like, my granddaddy went to Howard, so I'm going to Howard. And his granddaddy went to Howard, and my daddy went to. It's like the legacy and the
The
path, right?
pipeline.
And
Yeah.
so I think about those opportunities where, you may have a young white boy coming out of, California, who comes from a long line of XYZ men who worked at this organization for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And, from a child, they're prepping him of like, oh, I can't wait to take over as the executive and the CEO and this and that. And, they're prepping him for that process, right? And they're prepping him for those things. And, in his mind, it may feel like, I know what the process is, and I'm expecting. I know they're gonna haze me, but once I get to that C-suite corporate space, they're gonna welcome me, put the arms around me, and then I think about other examples. I think about the first generation low income Black student who has no idea what college is, who
Mm-hmm.
has no idea what a fraternity is, right? What it means to be in that, who's experiencing that for the first time, who has
Might be losing your audio. Hold on. I don't know if that's me or it's like you. I'm losing the audio. Hold on. Let me see if I can reset that. I apologize. Like a robot.
I sound like a robot.
I can hear you now. All right, cool.
You get me now?
Yeah, I fixed it. I don't know if that was just me or if that was the whole video, but I can hear you. I can hear you now. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no. It's all good, man. Like we are experiencing some tough technical difficulties today, man.
Yeah.
All good, all good. All right, so let's agree to just periodically check in throughout it.
Yeah.
Make sure we don't lose audio. And if we need to go back, like we can definitely record this, add in all any of those other pieces that we might miss.
Yeah. I think we're good to go though. But
All right.
appreciate it.
But yeah, I think about, that student going into that space where, you it may feel like, like I don't have a choice, right? And I don't
Right.
really know what to do with all of those things. And then at the same time, our vice president of community engagement, Lena, she loves to say that many troops can occupy the same space at one time. When we
Mm-hmm.
look at hazing prevention, many prevention efforts have pivoted over the years. Yes, we need to be talking about the folks that haze, but also it's important for us to talk to and preemptively engage those who are being hazed or who may have an idea of what's ahead of them and are still to some degree making that choice of it's worth it, right?
Mhm.
We need to engage with them because what we know about cycles, right, is that at the
Mhm.
end of this process, now you're going to be put faced with a decision, right? And by the time you finish that process, right, and make it through, your whole perspective may be shifted cognitively and emotionally about this.
Mhm.
And now you
Mhm.
may find yourself, right, as a gatekeeper, as an upholder of this thing. And Javon, one of the other things that pops up for me is when we look at the research, when we look at the experiences, watching Byron Hurt's film, talk about this a little bit. I believe that there is something within that man box and something within the collective socialization of men,
Mhm.
where men are seeking camaraderie and intimacy with other men. And that's not so deep under the surface, and that's in
Mhm.
the soil. That's in the soil that nurtures that fertile ground,
Mhm.
right? This isn't true for everyone, but for a lot of men, a lot of men have been hurt by other boys and men in their life, right? A lot of men are holding on to experiences, to things that can be trauma, but things that can just be painful experiences of growing up suffering at the hands of other men. And
Mhm.
you mean to tell me, and I'm gonna just speak for myself in this instance, right? 18-year-old me, who every person in my life, trauma has been caused by, pain has been caused by, has been another boy or man.
Mhm.
And you mean to tell me there's a group of men that look just like me racially, right? Black and brown men. They're going to love me. They're going to support me. They're going to cheer for me unconditionally for the rest of my life. I get to be myself around them, right? And I get to be connected to generations of men. All of anywhere I go in the world, I'm going to have
Mhm.
unconditional intimacy. And I'm saying that word purposely because we don't like to use that word,
Mhm.
right? We use it as a euphemism for sex, but when you look up the definition of intimacy, it has nothing to do with sex, right?
Mhm.
You mean to tell me I'm going to have that? Sign me up. Sign me up,
Right.
right? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff within the process of like, things that you mentioned. You said the word endure, right? A lot of that man box, places these pillars of my manhood rests on how much I can endure in my relationship to
Mhm.
violence. In terms of being able to dominate that with other men, I need to be ready to inflict violence at any given time,
Mhm.
right? Walking into a space around new men, sizing up, backs are straightening up, right? I need to be ready to
Get
inflict
the
violence.
the deep
Deep
voice.
voice, right?
Yeah.
Look up and down, right? You look back. That's that dominance, right? Unspoken,
Mhm.
dominance happening, right? I got to be ready to inflict that violence. Also, got to be ready to endure any form of violence. All
Mhm.
of that is there, but really, I'm really interested in that
Mhm.
intimacy, right? That
Mhm.
connection at the end of this, right? Because when we look at the hazing process from a fraternity standpoint, Byron talks about this. It isn't all just about hazing. There's an allure, and there are some things to that process of intake. I'll speak for myself again. I had a line of 10. It's 10 of us. And that was the biggest line we had since 1977 up in the mountains, right in North Carolina.
Okay.
My process and my experience with these 9 other gentlemen, that was the first time I felt a connection like that, right? The
Mhm.
bonding that we were doing, the connections, right? Having each other's back, right? The laughing, the memories, right? All of that is a part of it, but it doesn't overshadow the haze itself.
Yeah. I definitely hear you with that. And I almost makes me want to ask, like, what would it look like for us to be bonding differently? Like, because like we're sizing each other up in all these different ways. We have this pathway for so hazing is technically it's a sense like this rite of passage of sizing each other up to the point where we're able to get to that intimacy. So like we're talking about the man box, like how we're just discussing, like men coming together. We have to be ready for violence, but also at the same time be ready to endure violence. So we're kind of in each other's faces, sizing each other up. But once we get past that like space. It's like, okay, you're not gonna do nothing to me, and I'm not gonna do nothing to you. We can just be cool then.
Yeah.
Like, so it's sort of like that same pipeline has been systemized through hazing. So is there a way that we could skip all of that? Let's say, what does that look like for a future for men to get past the need to have to size each other up first and just like
Yeah.
get right into like building intimacy? Is
Yeah.
there a way that we can do that? Do you have like imagination for that, or
Yeah.
yeah? I'm just like my mind's just going. So
Yeah. Yeah. Mine too. And I know that whatever it is, it doesn't happen out of osmosis, right? It doesn't just
right,
happen. We don't just get there. It's the work, right? It's the
yeah,
work, it's the intentionality. And it's deeper than yes, we need the prevention efforts happening where, whether it's in HR, in the workplace, whether it's in the community, whether it's within the organizations that, we've named, whether it's the marching band, basketball team, fraternity, sorority. We still need that because that's the reality of what is. As we're working towards the world that should be, that's the
right,
luminiferous sun that guides us, right? We
hmm,
still got to be right here in the world that is and kind of hold both of those things.
yeah,
What does it look like for us to raise our boys, raise our boys in a way that doesn't perpetuate the teachings of the man box,
hmm,
right? What does it look like for us to teach our boys that it's okay to be you? It's okay to be exactly who you are. And also, you can give other men the space and grace to exist without consequences,
hmm,
right?
hmm,
What does that look like for us to teach that? What does it look like for us as adult men to let go of those notions, right? I'm
hmm,
doing a lot of casual dating right now. And something I'm on a few dating apps and something I'm seeing, in the swipe it, I keep seeing is come healed, come healed. I've been sitting with that, right? Of like, what does that mean? And what does that really like look like? What does that look like for a lot of men? And we talk about men being vulnerable, but we know that, we're not asking men to start being vulnerable. We're really asking men to heal from all the times that they tried to be vulnerable and it didn't work out, right?
hmm.
That's what we're really talking to. In a room
Oh,
full
that's
of adult men,
powerful.
that's what we're really talking to, Javon. Like when you and I go into a space and do the work of a call to men or the work that you're doing in
Hmm,
Ohio, right, through the Alliance for Ending Sexual Violence, that's what we're really talking to, right? Is the story of how we got here as men, right? All those
right,
teachers of the man box. So I think that it starts of breaking out of this cycle of sexualization, right? And moving into a cycle of liberation. I also think that it takes those who have upheld hazing for so long, right?
hmm,
Holding out hope for them because of the call to men. That's a key aspect of our work is we hold out hope for men in everything that we do.
hmm,
Holding out hope for those men while also at the same time, accepting the reality that, we're going to need some of these men to age out, right? To kind of age out of the game. We're going to need some of these men, some of them may not want to let go, right? Because
yeah,
when we look at hazing again, if we go back to that fraternity aspect, we know that there's a lot of younger people that are looking at this like, oof, right? Oof,
hmm.
like I don't know. I love Gen Z. I love Gen Alpha, right? They'll get on
Hmm.
TikTok and tell us, no, no, we not today.
We're gonna
Millennials,
start
Gen
doing it
Z,
whatever. You're
y'all
right.
did that, but like not today. Like we're not doing that, right? So I'm curious. Um, like when we think about those older generations that are holding on to stuff, right?
Hmm,
They're gonna have to let go. They're gonna have to age out. When we look at fraternities in particular, some of the most loyal donors on any college campus and university in America are these fraternity and sorority alumni, right?
hmm,
Some of the heaviest pressure to let go of this tradition and rites of passage that students may feel around hazing doesn't come from peer level. It could come from the alumni. It could come
hmm.
from those of the past who are saying, I'm sorry, you're about to mess with what? You're about to do
Right.
what? Right?
Tradition, right?
And that could come with retaliation, right? that can put these young folks in a really tough place to be in. Oh, I know in my heart this isn't right, right? Because I'm tasting danger every 5 minutes. 44 out of 50 states in the United States have hazing laws. And most of those hazing laws don't just speak to, the quote unquote hazer, right? It also speaks to the person going through and being hazed, experiencing hazing. When I was going through my initiation process, I had to sign so much paperwork that said I will not allow myself to be hazed. I will not participate in hazing,
Mhm.
right? I'm going through as a initiate. I'm not hazing nobody. But if an investigation would have popped off, right, or somebody would have, ran in and, ex- caught us experiencing hazing or anything like that, I also would have been subject to the law, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what most of the law, says is right there. And that's a really tough place to put an 18-year-old, a
Yes, it is.
19-year-old who just had to raise their hand a semester ago to ask to go to the bathroom at school,
Right.
right? That's a hard place to put somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with the end of the day, like what folks are really looking for is like you said, they're looking for that bonding, they're looking for that intimacy, they're looking for that brotherhood, they're looking for those connections and lifelong connections, It's like so to feel like there's so many levels of being punished for trying to achieve a goal of connection is pretty interesting, kind of sad to hear. That this is like all part of the process. So yeah, it's very messy. Like would you definitely hit the had the right term for it when you said at the beginning. It's like this is very messy, it can get very murky. It's not as straightforward to tackle and to solve resolve. We have to bring in a lot of context of what people are experiencing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Um, so we're gonna pivot just a little bit. Uh, for sexual violence. So it's kind of a two-part question. You don't have to answer both parts. So the first one part of it being like, do men experience sexual violence as part of hazing? What that would look like, whether that is men who are being abused or maybe men are encouraged to have certain like philosophies or values that might lead to abuse. Um, and what is the link between sexual violence and hazing? Uh, so kind of like two parts, but
yeah,
also the same question.
yeah, yeah. That's a good question. I think absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Mhm.
It reminds me of, the conversation we have about breaking down what is domestic violence, right?
Mhm.
Actually truly unpacking that and getting into that conversation when we're educating, anyone. At the core of domestic violence, it's about power and it's about control, no matter what manifestation of that domestic violence, right? When I'm working particularly with high school students or college students, we go to that schema, kind of like with hazing. We go to there's an image that pops up,
Mhm.
right? And that's how we as humans cognitively associate. Typically we go to that physical abuse with domestic violence, right? But we know that there's other forms that manifest themselves, whether it's
Right.
emotional, economic. Same with hazing, right? Going back to that spectrum, right? Power and control. Men can absolutely experience sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment while being hazed, right? Because some of those things, may not necessarily physically show up in that recognition, right, side of the spectrum. Um,
Mhm.
but given what this process is, right, and again, working towards that end goal, right, the humanity, hazing preys upon the humanity of both the hazer and the hazy. It preys upon that humanity, right? So I mentioned Javon, I, the hazer, I genuinely believe, right? I don't believe that, these are bad people, right? These are
Mhm.
folks carrying out learned behavior, but kind of still cheering, right, for the person at the end of the day. But there's
Yeah.
a lot that can go wrong within that process. And it reminds me of, a lot of situations that we'll see can be quid pro quo, right?
Mhm.
Of this for that. You want membership into this organization, you're going to have to, do this, right? Whether it's a sexual act with me or a sexual act with other hazies, right? Again, that humiliation, that degradation, right? That
Right.
abuse, all of those different things are wrapped up. and tied in that together. And I think that hazing has a very, very close relationship with sexual exploitation and sexual assault.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Thank you for giving us that insight for that. I know that with my work, I think I've only had one person, one or two folks I've maybe worked with that were experiencing hazing, and it was related to like a sexual violence. And there's limited resources for them for like being able to feel like they could talk about it. Like what you talked about a little bit earlier, for like, there's this reward at the end, like, at the end of the day, like what I'm looking for is just like getting to this membership and sort of like that quid pro quo there. And then going back to what you said before about the consent myth, right? So it's like men aren't necessarily like allowing these things. It's more so like that corrosion sometimes, so just that exploitation. And so having that conversation about what consent looks like when we're talking about hazing is very important. That's something I want to definitely emphasize for folks who are watching. It's like understanding that piece as well about what consent really is. And so then with that being said, like what's something that we can say to some of those men who might be experiencing hazing right now? Um, what are some words or stuff that maybe we can say to them to give them comfort, affirmation? Uh, yeah.
Uh, and Javon, I just wanted to back up to that previous question. What we also know within this man box teaching, and when we look at domestic violence and sexual assault numbers, we see that the numbers are lower of what men report, right? Men who have experienced
Right.
sexual assault, domestic violence, right? But again, when we get real curious about that, it doesn't mean that, men are, not being sexually assaulted or like victims of domestic violence or surviving these
Mm-hmm.
experiences. This man box teaches us that I cannot be a victim of this. I cannot experience this, right? Because men, number one, I'm supposed to always be on the prowl. Sex is a conquest, and it's supposed to be just with women, right?
Mm-hmm.
A man box is a very heteronormative box that it works to protect, right? And so I think for a lot of the cases that are reported in any arena, any area where hazing is happening, I think that there are a lot of men still processing, right? And still, there may be some fear and some shame, right? That they're working through, right? And maybe even omitting some things, or even cognitively trying to process and emotionally trying to cope with, oh, that wasn't sexual assault, right? We're men,
Right.
right? Like that doesn't, it wasn't anything like that, right? So I think a lot of men, within that frame are still held held captive by the man box,
Right.
right? Even in trying to voice that. And to your question about some things that we can say to men, whether they're experiencing hazing, whether they are carrying out that cycle. The first thing I would say to anybody is, I get it. I understand. I hear you. I know what it's like. I've been there. Everything that we can say, that we can put out into the space. I've heard it. I know the conversation that you say to yourself. I know
Mm-hmm.
also that there's some traffic on that highway between your head and your heart. And that may be in the quietest moments of the night when you're by yourself, right? But I know that there's some traffic jams happening on that highway, right? And so to those men experiencing that, I would encourage them to, first and foremost, don't diminish the traffic that's on the highway between your head and your heart, right? That's something that we see happen a lot in hazing, right? It is that diminishing of, this is going to make me stronger. This is going to make me tougher. Oh, it's not that bad. Well, back in 1977, they had to go through this. I'm only going through this. So it's really not that bad. If
Mm-hmm. Minimizing.
you feel that tension, there's something off between your actions and your values. That congruence is missing. Listen to that, right? Listen to that. Seek the help that you need, because it is incredibly hard. Because also, what I understand and what I would say to those men experiencing hazing, trying to walk away, is I understand that it's hard. Because particularly if it's a group thing happening, it's like, all right, Well, now I'm turning my back on these men and they got to stay back, right? And experience that. And they may experience it even worse, right? Retaliation, as we've named a few times before.
Mm-hmm.
Say I'm in a work environment. It's like, all right, what is that going to look like? Do I risk losing my job security, right? And my economic security then? If I'm on a college campus, shoot, what if this guy work at the cafeteria, right? What if this guy's the gatekeeper for a job or an internship, right? It's like that fear of retaliation. Also, your emotions are valid. That fear of, this social ridicule as well. Of I'm going to be seen as the weak one. I'm going to be seen as the snitch. I'm going to be seen as the one that drops. All of those things, right, are valid to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I would still encourage those men to also ask themselves, if we, what's on the line, right? What's truly on the line? And is this something that you really want to happen when you think about all of the families who have lost people to hazing, to all of the people who are living with pain and trauma unspoken, right? They're making. And I would also encourage those who are hazing to truly think about what are your long-term goals in life? Who do you say you are on paper? And who do you tell yourself you are inside? And how are all of those things lined up?
Uh-oh. Lost you right there. Maybe for about a second.
Javon, your audio is coming through a little strange.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep,
All right, cool. Yeah, I lost you right there, right at the very last second. Can you hear
yep,
me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you for that. I really loved everything you had to say right there. I was taking some notes, trying to write down everything. You was dropping what we call what Lena calls like gems,
Yeah,
jewels,
Jules.
jewels.
Yeah,
Yeah, you were definitely dropping a lot of jewels there. Um, I think that was beautiful about the affirmation you just gave. Recognition for folks of seeing and understanding like where they're coming from and how to really like navigate all those spaces, and especially beyond just the fraternity, right? You mentioned work, you mentioned being in the community, you mentioned like being a student. So I really appreciate that was all encompassing for that with different kinds of men. I do want to highlight again what you said. One of the first things you said is like, don't diminish the traffic jams on the highway between your head and your heart. Then that's amazing. That's a perfect way of really like describing some of the in and outs that men might be experiencing while they're navigating such complex emotions, especially for men who may not be given permission oftentimes to navigate complex emotions, but to giving us that permission, giving me that permission. I really appreciate that. I like that a lot. Um, so we're actually coming to 12:45. We only have about 10 or so minutes left together. Um, there aren't any more questions specifically for us to get into. Normally, I open it up and let folks who are joined with us, if they had any questions, to drop into the comments. I did want to highlight your resource. So Call them in, and Rahk here was more so gracious to help us develop a resource on hazing. So that would be sent out to programs and our members soon. It's a very good resource. There's 4 things who men are experiencing hazing can do, and 4 things men who are hazing others can do. So we talked about a lot of different of these things throughout this conversation. We talked about what a hazing is. We talked about consent. So like the question was like why men allow themselves to be hazed. So we talked a bit about consent. So about where does hazing happen. And so we got into a lot of the details. We got into a lot of some of the history. So hopefully this turns out to be a really good resource for everyone. I know that I learned a lot. I don't know if there's any closing words or questions maybe you have for me, Rahk, that we can discuss some more. Um, Otherwise, I'll probably get into a little bit of our closing for the video.
Yeah. Javon, I just wanted to say thank you again for having me, having a call to men here. Thank you to the
Absolutely.
OAESV. And if anybody is interested, I encourage you to check out acalltomen.org. We developed a curriculum a few years ago. If you're working with young boys in particular, it's a curriculum that can work for anyone, but really thinking about middle school and high school boys. It's called the Live Respect Curriculum. If anybody is wondering, well, how do I take some of those first steps with that group? I encourage you to download the Live Respect curriculum. So, thank you, J-Ball.
Yes, thank you, Rahk. I definitely want to highlight that curriculum as well. I've read through it, I've seen it. We'll make sure that we keep that links for folks to have access to. But yeah, so thank you again, Rahk, so much. This won't be our last collaboration by far. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for taking time to review this interview about the intersections of hazing, masculinity, and sexual violence as it pertains to engaging men. So if you want to submit any additional questions, we're going to have a link in the comment section for the Engaging Men Training and Technical Assistance Forum, where you can request and send in any questions for any of the engagement Q&As that we have had in the past or any ones that we have coming up. Our next Q&A is expected to be in September. We will be covering the topic of racial and sexual trauma and somatic treatment for that trauma. So hopefully we'll see you all next time. And again, thank you, Rahk, for your time and your talents and your expertise. I appreciate you immensely. So peace and solidarity. See you all next time.